we always do a dedication, and I thought it would be appropriate for our president, the president of the Friends, Sharia, to do the dedication that's in the book.
Right.
So,
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this, very gloomy Saturday. But yeah, and I want to thank Helen and Carl for this labor of love. They've worked on this book for the last 2 years. It really is beautiful, and we really appreciate you guys being here for this momentous occasion, to celebrate the launch of this book. So this book is dedicated to the enduring bond between Maple Grove Cemetery, now marking its 150th year, and its cherished neighbor, the community of Kew Gardens. We actually just celebrated our 150-year anniversary last week. Yeah.
We had a concert.
Yeah, it was a beautiful concert. We had a cantata that was made just for us. So if you guys weren't here to appreciate that, I'm sure it is on our YouTube channel for those of you that follow us on our Facebook and YouTube channel. So in the heart of Kew Gardens stands a quiet World War II memorial, nearly forgotten with the passing of time. Dedicated in 1948, it bears a metal plaque inscribed with the names of 27 young men from Kew Gardens. They were sons of this community who served their country with valor and did not return. One of them, Richard Smith, was brought home and now rests with honor at Maple Grove Cemetery. In his memory and in honor of each of the 27, this book is presented as a gift from Maple Grove Cemetery to the community of Kew Gardens. It is a revival of remembrance and a tribute to those who once walked these very streets with hope in their hearts. This project is proudly led by the Friends of Maple Grove Cemetery. May this book serve as a bridge between generations, a tribute to courage, and a promise renewed. We will remember them. Thank you. I want to encourage you all to sign up and be a member of the Friends. We are giving these books out free to everyone who's attending today. And anyone that would be interested in getting these books, have them stop by. Check out the work that we do here at the Friends. We are here to serve the community. So thank you all once again for being here. I'm going to pass it back to Carl.
Okay, order of show, we have this PowerPoint presentation, and Helen and I will be doing it. And after that, we will have the book signing downstairs. And you can see the further exhibit that Sean Miller has. So you've already got a taste of it, and I think that's a tiny portion of it. And there's 5 tables up there. No, 6 tables. 6 tables. All right. So without further ado, and if you have any cell phones, please turn them off because again, it is live stream. All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to the official book launch of the Kew Gardens World War II Memorial book. My name is Carl Bolinas. I was the president of the Friends of Maple Grove for over 15 years and served as the cemetery historian. I stand here with Helen Day, the current vice president of the Friends, another cemetery historian, and our genealogist. We worked very hard on this book to make sure it was as accurate as possible. This unique book has been a labor of love for both Helen and myself. It was born from remembrance, crafted with care, and inspired by the enduring spirit of this community. This year marks a remarkable milestone, 150 years of service at Maple Grove Cemetery, 1875 to 2025, and 20 years since the founding of the Friends of Maple Grove, an organization devoted to honoring, memorializing, and celebrating the over 100,000 people laid to rest here. We also strive to serve as a cultural heart of the community. In that spirit, we sought a project marking our anniversaries that would deepen our bond with our neighbor, Kew Gardens, a community that has grown alongside of us for more than 100 years. 78 years ago, on Memorial Day 1948, the Kew Gardens World War II monument was unveiled. It was a solemn and noble ceremony led by the Kew Gardens American Legion Post 1374. It was dedicated to the memory of 27 brave sons of Kew Gardens, young men who gave their lives in World War II. Their names were placed in the heart of the community so that time would never forget their sacrifice. Allow me to take you back to those uncertain and shadowed days. When the war started, Kew Gardens was still a young neighborhood, barely 30 years old, a place of quiet streets. But for the families who lived here and for those across the country, the world was suddenly turned upside down. The echo of war stretched from distant shores to our tranquil Queens streets. Sons went off to fight, families waited by the radio, and the dreams of a peaceful, growing community was placed on hold, replaced by ration books, telegrams, and prayers. World War II erupted across Europe in 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. The clouds of war gathered quickly, causing a long and ominous shadow across the globe. For 2 years, the United States remained officially neutral, watching, waiting, hoping to avoid the flames of a worldwide conflict. But everything changed on December 7, 1941, a date that will live in infamy. Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, and in that single day, America was thrust into the war. From that moment forward, there was no turning back. Every town, every neighborhood, including Kew Gardens, would now play a role in the most devastating war the world had ever seen. From Europe to the Pacific, every corner of the globe trembled under the weight of conflict. For the young men and women of Kew Gardens, life was suddenly interrupted. College plans were set aside. Wedding vows postponed. Dreams of careers, of building a family, of a quiet life were halted. They were all put on hold. Young men traded school books for rifles, baseball gloves for helmets. Amid this chaos, they carried with them the hopes of a nation and the love of their hometowns. These images are both stark and sobering. They capture not only a war, but a world forever changed.
The quaint little town of Kew Gardens, nestled in the heart of Queens, stood far from the front lines, far from the thunder of war. It was their sacred place. It was home. Much has changed since those days. Buildings have been raised and new ones have replaced them. Streets have shifted, but the spirit of this neighborhood remains. There are the same sidewalks they walked, the same porches where mothers waited, the same trees that shaded their childhood days. This was the town they loved, and when the call came to serve and defend, they did not hesitate. They left the comforts of home to protect it in far-off places and lands they had never seen. The first half of the book gives us a glimpse of what they fought to protect: home. Here is a circa 1912 photograph that captures Lefferts Boulevard in its earliest days, gently sloping upward toward Kew Gardens Road. At this summit, just visible through the haze of trees, stands the bell tower of the old Maple Grove Cemetery Administration Building, erected in 1880. Below, the bridge spanning the Long Island Railroad tracks. The bridge once stood open to the air, now busy with the bustle of shops, and affectionately known as the Ponte Vecchio of Kew Gardens. In the foreground, the Homestead Building that served as the vibrant heart of early business. It was the gathering place for this budding community. So much has changed, yet the soul of Kew Gardens remains. In this image, we see not only streets and buildings, but the quiet beginnings of the town that 27 brave sons would one day leave behind, carrying its memory into war. The book includes many rare photographs, like the 4 shown here, hidden for decades. These images help us connect with the early days of Kew Gardens, a growing community filled with new families, fresh hopes, and the promise of a better future. These young men grew up watching their neighborhood take shape. These photos help us to open a window to the past. Some you will recognize, and others you will wonder about. This early 1900s photograph captures a joyful gathering at the Richmond Hill Golf Club, where neighbors came together amidst rolling hills and open skies. Founded in 1896, the club built a charming clubhouse and laid out a 9-hole course that stretched across the land north of Richmond Hill. This area was the playground for the people of Richmond Hill. These very grounds, once echoing with laughter and a crack of golf clubs, would eventually blossom into the community we now know as Kew Gardens. By 1908, the golf course had closed, and by early spring, the streets were laid across the former fairways and homes began to rise. In 1910, the Long Island Railroad built a depot, and the new community was officially named Kew. But the name puzzled some, and Gardens was added to the original name, and Kew Gardens was born. This rare 1920s photograph shows an early Kew Gardens building that has stood like a sentinel through the decades. Though the neighborhood around it has changed, the building remains. It would later become a beloved local landmark, Danny's House of Pizza. Another rare 1920s photograph was taken on Lefferts Boulevard and shows the staircase on the left leading down to the Kew Gardens Long Island Railroad Depot that would take you to Manhattan. A simple structure in a quieter time that shows us how much the world and this community has changed over the last century. But for the young men who left for war in the 1940s, these early images of Kew Gardens were the ones they carried in their hearts. They are snapshots of home before the world began. What a contrast these young men and women from our community witnessed, drawn into a global conflict that began on December 7, 1941. They left behind the beauty of their hometown. The war would rage on until 1945. During those long years, their lives changed, and so did the world. But the war ended on September 2, 1945, when Japan formally surrendered, and the world rejoiced. It was over. Across the nation, celebrations marked the end of years of fear and hardship. Many from our community returned home to those celebrations, but 27 young men from Kew Gardens did not. Their names were not forgotten. They were spoken aloud and remembered. The Homestead Hotel opened in 1928 and offered 120 rooms arranged in suites of 1, 2, and 3. In 1940, Ciro's nightclub opened at the Homestead and offered big band music and an outdoor terrace for dinner and dancing. A headliner at Ciro's for many years was Sleepy Hall and his orchestra. The Homestead Hotel was a landmark and a stable part of the community. During the dark days of World War II, a large wooden sign stood on the front lawn bearing the names of the men and women of Kew Gardens who were serving their country. It was decided that a permanent memorial would be placed here to honor the 27 young men from the community who never came home. The Kew Gardens World War II Memorial was unveiled on Memorial Day, May 31st, 1948. It was a day marked by deep emotion and community pride. Flags waved, feet marched, trumpets blared. There were streamers, ribbons, floral wreaths, and speeches filled with gratitude. It was a heartfelt thank you to the 27 young men who never came home, and a solemn promise that they would never be forgotten. For many years, the Kew Gardens community gathered on Memorial Day to honor the 27 who never came home. Scouts stood in formation, trumpets played taps, and a parade marched up Lefferts Boulevard from Hillside Avenue to the memorial. One year, a grandstand was erected with veterans and dignitaries who spoke with reverence. The monument was not just a marker. It was a gathering place of gratitude, remembrance, and respect. As the decades passed, the names on the monument began to blur into silence, stark letters on a quiet metal tablet. Now, 78 years later, it is time to speak their names once more. This book exists so this generation and those to follow may come to know these young men not just as soldiers who died in war, but as sons of Kew Gardens. Within these pages, we share their lives and tell their stories, their sacrifices, their courage, and their hometown roots. As you turn these pages, we will speak their names again, and in doing so, we will bring them back to life.
The beginning of this book began in my classroom years ago. I taught social studies for 40 years, always trying to make history come alive. I believe that lessons should not just be learned, but remembered. I encourage my honor class to take part in community projects, and we attended Veterans Days and Memorial Day ceremonies. Here, a group of students stands before the local Jamaica States World War II Memorial, which lists 10 men from that community who were killed in action during World War II. It was moments like these that planted the seed. We decided that the residents of Jamaica States deserved to know more about the 10 men listed on their World War II memorial. My students researched and began to collect newspaper articles, obituaries, and photographs, piecing together the lives behind the names. Moved by what they uncovered, they proposed to write a book. They applied for a grant, hired an editor, and compiled their findings into a powerful book. It was their way of honoring these soldiers and giving back. By doing this project, they were making sure these stories would never be forgotten. The last full measure of devotion was the book they created and published in 2020. The 10 names on the memorial came to life, and each soldier was able to tell their story. And at the next Veterans Day event, the students stunned the audience by reciting short biographies. Many filled with emotion, the names on the memorials came to life. Like the Kew Gardens Memorial, erected in 1948, the community of Jamaica States placed a World War II memorial to honor who never came back on Veterans Day, November 10, 1950. As mentioned in the opening, this year marks a remarkable milestone, the 150th year of service of Maple Grove Cemetery, and the 20th anniversary of the founding of the Friends of Maple Grove. Our mission has always been clear: to honor, memorialize, and celebrate life, while fostering public understanding and appreciation of the cemetery's artistic, historical, horticultural, and cultural resources. Through multicultural events and meaningful programs, we strive to preserve the tranquility of the landscape, the privacy of families, and the sacred stories of the 100,000 people we are privileged to care for. Our guiding motto is simple, yet powerful: where history comes alive. In that spirit, this special book project was born. It developed to mark our shared anniversaries and deepen our connection to our longtime neighbor, Kew Gardens, a community that has grown beside us for over a century. The result is this book, a tribute to 27 young men from Kew Gardens who never returned home from World War II. Their stories are powerful, their names are sacred. We hold dear the ancient Egyptian belief inscribed on the granite wall of this center. To speak the names of the dead is to make them live again. And so with every page, with every photograph, with every memory shared today, we speak their names. We bring them back to life, and as we pass their legacy on to the next generation, the title of this book comes from a plaque itself: Peaceful, they rest in glory everlasting. The first part of this book gives a detailed history of Kew Gardens, from its founding to its vibrant community that it has become. We took a look at the town these 27 soldiers once called home. These were the streets that they walked. These were the landmarks they knew. This was the home they fought for. This section of the book was taken from a previous student-led book project, Images of America, Kew Gardens, published in 2014. This book was carefully researched, features over 120 vintage images. Its foreword was written by a celebrated Kew Gardens native, Barry Lewis, who met with the students, guided their work, and praised their passion for history. Through this book, with its photographs, letters, and heartfelt research, we begin to truly know these young men of Kew Gardens. They are no longer just names on a metal plaque. Their memory lives on, preserved in these pages and in their stories we're about to share. In the next few slides, we highlight several of the brave individuals, sons, students, neighbors. They gave everything and never returned home. Though they died far from the streets they once knew, their spirit lives on. And with this book, that spirit shines brighter than ever, illuminated through their stories, remembered in every name and carried forward by all who read.
William Bain. At 28 years old, William Bain was a grown man with a steady heart and quiet strength, a proud son of Kew Gardens who lived at 11937 Metropolitan Avenue. He served with honor and gave his life in the fight for freedom during World War II. His sacrifice stands as a solemn reminder that courage endures beyond fear, and that every name on the plaque once belonged to someone deeply loved. William was buried at sea. At the top is an image of his name as it appears on the Kew Gardens Memorial. The book contains old newspaper articles detailing their life, and when found, photographs of these young men and some of their Kew Gardens residences. Arthur Berg. Arthur Berg lived at 10802 72nd Avenue and worked as a shoe salesman before the war. But when duty called, he left behind the quiet streets of Kew Gardens for the vast skies of the Pacific. Serving with honor at the Battle of Biak, his life was tragically cut short when his plane was shot down in the Pacific. The battle was part of General Douglas MacArthur's Southwest Pacific Offensive, drive to clear New Guinea in preparation for an invasion of the Philippines. His name reminds us that even ordinary lives can rise to extraordinary heights. George Blass. George was just 22 years old, a proud graduate of Newtown High School, who lived at 110 Newbold Place, which is now 82nd Road. Although he never saw combat, he lost his life during a flight training exercise, giving his all in preparation to serve his country. The organ at the First Church of Kew Gardens, a church he attended, was dedicated in his memory, and he rests today in Evergreen Cemetery in Brooklyn. Charles Kluger. Charles Kluger was 26 years old and attended PS 99 and became a beloved teacher at both Richmond Hill and Forest Hills High School. He lived at 8426 115th Street and served as a blimp pilot off the coast of Maine, patrolling for German submarines. It was here he gave his life, watching the water so others might sleep safely. He is buried at the Church of the Redeemer Cemetery in Pennsylvania. Just 2 years earlier, his younger brother Alan, only 18 years old, and a former student from Richmond Hill High School, perished in the infamous Coconut Grove Fire of 1942. 2 sons lost too soon, one to war, the other to tragedy. Walter Roth. At 34, Walter Roth was among the older soldiers from Kew Gardens to serve and to fall. He lived at 8518 Willow Street, now 122nd Street, and took part in Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa near Casablanca. There, in the heat of that early campaign, he gave his life for the cause of freedom. He now rests with honor at the North African American Cemetery, his courage etched into the sands of history and the hearts of those he left behind. Jacob Mass. Just 18 years old, Jacob Mass was the youngest of the 27 heroes we honor today. He lived at 8451 Beverly Road and served bravely in the Pacific Theater, fighting in the fierce Battle of Saipan. The U.S. was able to use Saipan as a strategic base from which to attack Japan, particularly Tokyo. He was buried at sea, never to return home, but his name is anchored forever in our memory. His youth did not shield him from war, but it magnified the depth of his sacrifice.
Herbert Nash. At 25 years old, Herbert Nash lived at 8309 Talbot Road and was a proud member of the First Church of Kew Gardens. He served as a B-17 pilot with the 350th Bomber Squadron, flying dangerous missions over Europe. His plane crashed in Germany, claiming his life in the line of duty. He is buried at Woodmere Memorial Park in Huntington. The organ at his home church was shared in his memory with other fellow Kew Gardens soldiers, including George Black. Commander John M. Birmingham. At 36 years old, Commander John M. Birmingham of 8409 Talbot Street was both a father and a fearless naval officer. His daughters attended Our Lady of Martyrs School in Forest Hills. And even on the home front, they served with pride. In one poignant photograph, they stand in the lobby of what is now the Kew Gardens Cinema, urging Kew Gardens neighbors to purchase war bonds and support the cause their father had fought for. Commander Birmingham led the destroyer, the USS Perry, through the early harrowing months of the Pacific War. On February 9, 1942, under relentless Japanese assault in Darwin Harbor, Australia, he and his crew went down with their ship, their guns still fired. He was lost at sea, but his story, his courage, and his family's devotion remain deeply etched in the heart of this community. Edward Enners III. Just 19 years old, Edward Enners III lived at 8309 Talbot Street and was raised in the heart of Kew Gardens. He attended PS 99 and Forest Hills High School and was a member of the First Church of Kew Gardens, where the electronic church chimes were later dedicated in his memory. Edward served with the legendary 10th Mountain Division, an elite unit known for its expertise in mountain and cold weather combat. On the Italian front, his division helped break German strongholds in the Apennines, fighting with unshakable courage. Though his life was brief, his bravery was towering. He now rests at Long Island National Cemetery. And just a little shout out, Natalia. Natalia helped find this photograph. He is unidentified. We don't know, but he's in that photograph. Richard Francis Smith. Richard Francis Smith lived with his mother Helen and sister Frances at 115-25 Metropolitan Avenue in Kew Gardens. He attended Public School 99 and graduated from Richmond Hill High School. Before the war, he worked for 5 years at Chase National Bank, a quiet life filled with promise. In November 1942, he enlisted in the Naval Air Forces, but was honorably discharged with a medical release in June of 1943. Refusing to remain on the sidelines, Richard enlisted again, just 2 months later, this time in the U.S. Army. He trained at Fort Bragg and was sent overseas in the fall of 1944. He was killed in action during the Battle of the Bulge on December 16, 1944, just 6 weeks after arriving in Europe. He was 26 years old. It had been his solemn wish that if he did not return, his body be brought home. And so it was. Richard Francis Smith now rests in his native soil of Kew Gardens at Maple Grove Cemetery. Of the 27, he is the only one whose remains were brought back home to Kew Gardens. Richard was a man of unwavering resolve who answered duty's call not once, but twice. James Papillon. James Papillon was just 26 years old, the eldest son of Arshad and Elvis Papillon of 8409 Talbot Street. He attended the Kew Forest School, where he excelled in football, soccer, and tennis. James later studied at MIT and graduated from the University of Alabama. In 1940, he joined the Army Air Force and was stationed at Pearl Harbor with the 7th AAF Weather Squadron. He was killed on December 7, 1941, during the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on Hickman Field. Just 4 days earlier, he had written home with holiday cheer and a haunting premonition. Perhaps we will be in war soon. He never saw another Christmas. James was a member of the First Church of Kew Gardens, where the organ was dedicated in his memory. He was buried at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu.
William C. Yepson. Second Lieutenant William C. Yepson, age 32, lived at the Mowbray Apartments in Kew Gardens. Serving in the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 82nd Airborne Division, Lieutenant Yepson was thrust into the heart of the Battle of the Bulge. On December 20th, 1944, during brutal fighting, he took an exposed position under fire. Crawling with a machine gun, he silenced a German automatic weapon crew and held off a tank with bursts of tracer fire, refusing to retreat. Mortally wounded by direct cannon fire, he died holding the line so others could live. For his extraordinary heroism, he was posthumously awarded the Silver Star and the Purple Heart. He now rests at Henri Chapelle American Cemetery in Belgium, but the Jepson family plot is located here at Maple Grove Cemetery. Paul Fred Boland. At just 23 years old, Paul Fred Boland had already crossed continents in service of his country. He grew up at 132 Wadley Street in Kew Gardens, attending PS 99. In 1939, 2 years before America officially entered the war, Paul enlisted in the Army and was stationed at the Panama Canal Zone. After Pearl Harbor, he returned stateside and later volunteered for the elite paratroopers of the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division, the famed Screaming Eagles. He parachuted into Normandy on D-Day and was wounded in action, earning his first Purple Heart. After 3 months of recovery, he returned to battle and fought in Holland during Operation Market Garden. There, on September 21st, 1944, Paul was wounded again, and this time the cost was his life. For his bravery, he was awarded the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart with Oak Leaf Cluster. He now rests at Henri Chapelle American Cemetery in Belgium. Robert Marsh. Robert Ainley Marsh was just 24 years old when he vanished into the Pacific. He lived at 8215 Abingdon Road and was a member of the First Church of Kew Gardens, where the memorial organ was dedicated in his honor. A graduate of Princeton University and the Harvard School of Business, he was crazy about the Navy, his mother said. He asked to be sent to sea himself. Commissioned as an ensign in 1941, Robert served in Boston and Washington, D.C. before requesting sea duty. That request would carry him to the waters off Savo Island near Guadalcanal. On August 10, 1942, he was reported missing and never heard from again. Robert is memorialized at the Manila American Cemetery in the Philippines. His was a life of both brilliance and bravery, devoted to his country and the call of the open sea. Barney Raffine. Private First Class Barney Raffine, age 24, was an artillery surveyor with the 140th Field Artillery Regiment, 37th Division. He was the son of Dr. and Mrs. Louis Raffine of 11802 Liberty Avenue. In the Pacific, Barney was among the first men ashore at Bougainville, a vital front in the effort to neutralize Japanese strongholds across the region. The battle reshaped the balance in the South Pacific. Barney's courage helped pave the way for Allied airfields and operations that pushed toward victory. He died on April 20th, 1945, near the war's end, in his fight for freedom. He was awarded the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart and is buried at the Manila American Cemetery in the Philippines. His memory lives on, not just in official records or medals, but through the loving care of his nephew, Barney Sherman, who provided photographs of Barney to ensure his legacy is never forgotten. Thorington Sanger. Thor was born in California, the son of Jesse William Sanger, a U.S. Trade Commissioner whose diplomatic work brought the family to Japan, Mexico, Australia, and New York. His family lived in the Kew Gardens Inn at Union Turnpike and Kew Gardens Road, on the very ground where the E&F subway station now stands. In 1939, Thorington married and welcomed a daughter. He answered the call to service by joining the Merchant Marine. Assigned as the purser aboard the SS John Winthrop, a newly built Liberty ship. These ugly ducklings of the sea, mass-produced yet mighty, carried the promise of liberty across the Atlantic. In September 1942, the John Winthrop joined a convoy of ships sailing into the stormy North Atlantic. When the ship fell behind the convoy, it became a straggler and a target. On September 24, 1942, it was attacked by the German U-boat U-619. 5 torpedoes struck the vessel. The final blow came from the enemy's deck gun, and the ship was split in two and sunk. Of the over 60 ships in the convoy, the John Winthrop was the only one lost. There were no survivors. Thornton Sanger was 28 years old. He left behind a young wife, a little girl, and a story of quiet courage that crosses oceans and generations. Though claimed by the sea, he remains anchored in our memory, forever part of the Kew Gardens and forever a symbol of liberty carried bravely into the storm.
These 16 stories are only a glimpse, just part of the 27 young heroes from Kew Gardens who never came home. From this quiet town, these sons of Kew Gardens were sent to every corner of the world, from the Pacific Islands to the battlefields of Europe and even to the deserts of Africa. And they met their call with courage, honor, and sacrifice. We are proud of every World War II veteran who called Kew Gardens home. And we are equally proud that at Maple Grove Cemetery, hundreds of veterans from many generations and conflicts rest in honored peace, including soldiers who fought as far back as the War of 1812. Thanks to the tireless work of Helen Day, we've documented a list of over 100 Civil War veterans who also laid to rest at Maple Grove. Their service forever remembered. While preparing the Kew Gardens World War II Memorial book, our research uncovered the names of several local heroes whose service and sacrifice were not included in the Kew Gardens Monument. We do not know why they were omitted, but in a gesture of remembrance and inclusiveness, we honor them here. Cyril A. Arnold, John W. Deloney, and Marshall W. Mathison. We have learned that Cyril was on a routine flight out of Floyd Bennett Field when the plane went into its tailspin and crashed into the waters near Reese Park, killing both. Cyril's remains were discovered 8 days later off Fort Tilden, and the pilot's remain was found 3 months later. John Delaney died from wounds he received at Guadalcanal and was buried at sea. So far we know that Marshall W. Matheson lived at the Homestead Hotel. Their names stand with the others. They are remembered, respected, and spoken aloud. What became of the American Legion post 1374, who erected this monument? Through careful research in old newspapers, we discovered that post 1374 was formed in the middle part of 1946, no doubt by veterans newly returned from the war. They held regular meetings at the First Presbyterian Church of Kew Gardens, just across from Maple Grove Cemetery. One of the earliest and most noble acts was to rally the community, raise funds, and dedicate the Kew Gardens World War II Memorial in 1948 on Memorial Day, May 31st, barely 2 years after their founding. For decades, they honored the fallen with parades, scout ceremonies, floral tributes, and the solemn sound of taps. Though the post quietly dissolved by the 1980s, their devotion has not been forgotten. Through research and remembrance, we now bring their story back into the light alongside the names they so proudly preserved on the memorial they erected on unveil. With this book, we pick up where they left off, continuing their sacred work of honoring the brave, ensuring and those sons of Kew Gardens are never forgotten. It is our honor to welcome a special guest today for the book launch, Dominic Critelli. A 104-year-old World War II veteran and a hero of the Battle of the Bulge, born in Italy, Dominic came to Kew Gardens in 1929. He attended PS 99 and Richmond Hill High School And like so many in this community, he answered his country's call with bravery and conviction. Dominic wrote the foreword to this book. His words came from the history he lived, from memory, from sacrifice, from love of country and community. His presence here today reminds us that history is not just something we read. It is something we honor in the flesh while we still can. Today, we hold a special reverence for those who were killed in action and carry them in their hearts. I've asked Dan, his nephew, to read that forward that he wrote.
Good afternoon, everyone, and congratulations to Helen and Carl, and thank you for putting this book together and honoring these men. It's a privilege for me to read the foreword from Dominic, and Remembering Freedom, a reflection on sacrifice and legacy. The milestone of becoming 105 years old on my next birthday gives me time to reflect on my life. I often think about the men who served alongside me during World War II. Some of them never made it home, and I think about the soldiers whose names are found on the Kew Gardens WWII Memorial on Lefferts Boulevard. Just a short walk from where I spent much of my early life. Like many of them, I attended PS 99 in Richmond Hill High School. I was born in Italy on April 8, 1921, and I remember arriving in America at the age of 8, traveling with my mother, Angela, and my younger sister, Anna. We passed through Ellis Island, and when we set foot on American soil, my father, Tommaso, who had arrived years earlier, was waiting for us on the other side. We settled in Richmond Hill, Kew Gardens, where my parents are now laid to rest at the historic Maple Grove Cemetery. When I was called to serve, I had no idea of the horrors we would face or how long the war would last. The Battle of the Bulge, where I fought, remains one of the most brutal experiences of my life. But it was also a time of brotherhood, where we learned what it meant to rely on one another, to share the burden of survival, and to carry forward the memory of those we lost. Many of my comrades did not make it home from the war, but I was fortunate enough to return home and bring along with me cherished memories of the brave soldiers that served alongside me. Their names live on, not only in the memorials that honor them, but also in the memories of those who remember their courage and sacrifice. I spent much of my later years sharing my story with young people, especially those who are just beginning to learn what it means to be free. I tell them about the 4 freedoms, those 4 fundamental rights that President Franklin D. Roosevelt spoke about in 1941, when the world was still in the grip of the war. Roosevelt said that every person in the world deserves to have 4 freedoms: freedom of speech and expression, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. As I look at the young faces in front of me, I remind them that the freedoms are not just words. They are gifts we must protect, not only for ourselves, but for the future generations. I tell them that freedom of speech means having the right to speak your mind without the fear of punishment. Freedom of worship means being able to follow your faith without oppression. Freedom from want means having enough to live with dignity, and freedom from means living in safety, with the assurance that you can walk through life without terror or violence or injustice. These freedoms are worth fighting for, and they're worth sacrificing for. Many of the men whose names on the Kew Gardens WWII Memorial fought for these freedoms, and many of them gave their lives to ensure that these rights would be passed on to the future generations. Their courage and sacrifice are a reminder that freedom is not something to be taken for granted. It is something we must cherish, uphold, and continue to defend. It is with deep respect and gratitude that I lend my voice to this book, which will honor the 27 men whose names are inscribed on Kew Gardens WWII Memorial. These men, like so many others, gave everything for their country, their families, and their communities. The story of their service is not just a story of war, but a story of duty, sacrifice, and the enduring love of the country. While the world has changed in countless ways over the years, one thing remains the same: the importance of remembering and honoring those who sacrificed it all to defend our four freedoms. As I look at the memorial today, I am reminded that each name represents not just a soldier, but a family, a community, and a piece of our shared history. Their legacy lives on in the streets of Kew Gardens, in the places they once called home, and in the hearts of those who never forget. I hope this book will help bring their stories to light once again, so the generations who come after us can know the depth of the sacrifices and the strength of spirit that defined the men of Kew Gardens who served in World War II. It is a gift to the community from those who came before us, and as a reminder to those who will come after us that we must never forget the price of freedom. May we always honor their memory with respect and dignity they deserve, and may never take for granted the freedom we enjoy today. Remember, freedom is not free. With deepest respect, Dominic Critelli.
Our book has two forwards. The second is from a notable Kew Gardens landmark, Sabri Dani, a noted Kew Gardens personality and son of Ramiz, who in 1959 opened Danny's House of Pizza, has lived his life in view of the 1948 World War II monument. From the windows of the pizzeria, he and his father have quietly watched generations come and go. They witnessed families pausing, placing wreaths, raising flags, etc. Few have observed that monument more faithfully or with greater reverence. Few knew the monument across the street more intimately than the Dannys, who for decades watched over it from their store, witnessing the ebb and flow of remembrance through the heart of Kew Gardens. In conclusion, in 1948, the citizens of Kew Gardens gathered with pride to unveil this monument. That was 78 years ago. Flags waving, trumpets blaring, and promises made to remember forever. But the years have taken their toll. And now, after so many decades of silence, the 27 names on this Kew Gardens World War II memorial finally have their voice again. We do not cast blame, but we do raise a quiet alarm. You know who they are now, and you know their stories. Say their names. Carved into the granite wall downstairs is a 3,000-year-old Egyptian belief. To say the name of the dead is to make them live again. Through this book, they are more than just names on a forgotten plaque. They are fathers, sons, brothers, neighbors, and heroes. They have been brought back into the light. Their stories live once more. We have drawn them from history's shadows, and in doing so, we remind ourselves and all who will listen that remembrance is an act of revival. Across this nation, so many memorials are fading. Their names are growing silent. Their stories are slipping away. But when we take the time to learn their stories, when we speak their names aloud, we do something sacred. We bring them back to life. This book is more than paper and ink. It is a revival, a call to arms. With this work, we have given these heroes a fresh breath of life. We must not let them vanish again. We are sending a message across our country. Let this effort in Kew Gardens be a voice to every town, every village, and every city. Look at your own memorials. Do not let them fade into darkness. It is up to you, each one of you. Carry their legacy forward. Preserve their memory. Honor their names. Tell their stories, just as we have done here today. Let this wind rise and let it roar. Let us not just remember them today. Let us tell their stories tomorrow. Thank you. to have a moment of silence. And because as we said, Richard Smith is here, but the names are on the memorial that's on Lefferts Boulevard. Would you like to say a few words? Please come.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today because it's such a wonderful thing to do. I remember all my buddies. I remember what we went through. And when we go places, some people say, well, you were heroes. You were heroes. We weren't the heroes, ladies and gentlemen. The heroes are laying down. They're laying down the dirt. I gained 80 years more than they did. 80 years I gained where they kept on living where they were. They had 22, 23 years. So we had our Memorial Day. It was a very nice Memorial Day, but sometimes we fail to realize that the heroes are the heroes that never came back. And I salute them. Thank you.
Thank you. We will proceed downstairs. The exhibition that Sean has put together is still down there. And we will have the books, and Helen and I will do a book signing of the books. They are, as Sherry has said, a free gift to the community. It's not to be used as a paperweight. Please, it is to be read and to be cherished. And we make a donation. We're not asking for anything, but a donation jar is there. We hope for a second printing next year. So we'll see how many we can give out to the community, and thank you very much.